Only people in the world who call me Mikey are my mom occasionally and a couple like old friends, like from true childhood.
Any bullies? Oh, Mikey Schur made good for himself, didn't he? Oh, Mikey.
Why do you have him hanging out with the mob?
Bullies from the Bronx in the 1930s?
Yeah, see? Oh, Mikey Schur. He thinks he's a hot shot. Went to Hollywood.
Hey.
Made it big.
Mikey Schur, what's the big idea, see?
What's the big idea?
Mikey's wicked smart.
Oh, no, but he grew up in Connecticut.
I mean, am I gonna get to come on Cinephobe or not?
You are.
You soft invited me on.
No, it's done. We booked. We can't say the name of the movie because we don't want to give it away. But
what is Cinephobe?
Oh,
Right.
I'm glad you asked. Cinephobe is the podcast where Zach, Harper, and I watch movies that are poorly rated by Rotten Tomatoes and try to ascertain whether or not they were accurately poorly rated or maybe they didn't get a fair shake. It's Cinephobe. It's produced by Anthony Mays, and you get it wherever you get podcasts. We're in the daisy chain here, guys. Every movie has to have a connection to the movie before it. And so today, we entered The Sandman as we did The Waterboy, 1998
Nice.
Adam Sandler movie, The Waterboy.
I mean, does Cinephobe need a new spiel? Because you sounded bored saying that.
You are bored by the description for your own podcast, but you know what's not boring around here? Mike
Cinephobe.
Schur is now inviting himself on people's podcasts because they were criticizing you and they were laughing at you, Mike, the other day in a meeting we were talking because they were saying, Mike Schur is watching too much sports. Doesn't he have another life? He cares too much about these things. And now your next evolution as someone who's a pioneer in the Hollywood industry is to just invite yourself on podcasts?
Listen, both sports and podcasts are excellent ways to avoid doing the work that you actually should be doing. Like I have a lot of work I should be doing. If I just sit around doing nothing, I feel guilty. If I say I have to watch this Heat Sixers game or I have to go on this podcast, then it feels like this is the first thing that Meadowlark, frankly, has ever given me is an excuse to avoid work that I should be doing. So now I'm like, I was texting with Amin last night, play the Look at Me Louie sound if you want, but I was.
It doesn't work
and
that way.
I suddenly
I
realized.
was texting with Mike Schur last night. That's how it was.
Yeah.
I suddenly realized that there is a movie, which I won't name, that is that maybe didn't get the best reviews or audience reaction that I think is one of the greatest films of its genre ever made, and I invited myself on Cinephobe to talk about it. Which is great for everyone. Everybody wins.
Are you making a face, Jessica, because they're being so cryptic about the movie?
Yes, I want to know what movie it is.
No,
Can
can't. We
Amin
can't
or Mike
release.
Schur text me?
I get in trouble all the time about giving away what the movie is going to be when we're on Cinephobe, when we're on this show. What Cinephobe's next movie is going to be, or 2 movies down. I think last time I was here.
Does the suspense drive numbers?
I don't think so. But Zach and
question.
Mays go nuts. So about last time I was here, so this was before Super Bowl, I offhandedly made a comment about Speed 2, which is a movie that we did, and Billy Gill was the guest. And these guys got so upset. He can't keep his mouth shut. Just gotta save it for the show. I'm
That
like,
might just be a
nobody
Billy
cares.
thing.
No,
It could be.
Billy didn't mind. This is a Zach and Mays thing.
But if you told us the name of the movie,
What's the
don't you
movie?
think people might be more inclined
What's
to
the
tune in?
movie so
You know?
people know to hear Mike Schur's opinions on this movie that he thinks is criminally underrated? That's a good
We haven't
promotion
even
for
recorded it
Cinephobe.
yet.
Yeah.
They shouldn't know until we
and
until we're closer to it being on.
All right,
the
excellent
podcast.
promotion by both of you guys.
Mike Schur texted me and told me what it was.
Okay, excellent. You want to
now I'm playing the
Give it to
sound.
her.
There you
like
go.
to? Would you like to? No, that's the wrong one. What happened to Look at Me Louise? I thought we had a Look at Me Louise back there somewhere. Let's do stat of the day as well here. I don't know. Mike Schur has many jobs that he's not doing right now, so he could do this one, the most important one of looking up a single stat a day as an intern for Meadowlark Media. Go ahead and. Amin, would you please stop fiddling with your phone? $10. $10, please, because it's the second time. It's the second
Was
time
that
it's happened.
Amazing.
I let it go the first time, and
See if he
went
pays it.
right back to
Yeah.
it because it didn't cost him any
One
money.
time.
$10. Go ahead and play stat of the
I'm
day.
watching.
Start of the day. It is your start of the day. Start of the day. Start of the day. It is your start of the day. Start of the day. Start of the day. It is your start of the day. Start of the day, start of the day, it is the start of the day.
pound, $10.
Expensive.
Thank you for turning original sound on so I could hear the music today. Folks, guess what? It's the 61st anniversary. 62nd anniversary. 61st of Wilt dropping 100 points. March 2nd, 1962.
Mm-hmm.
And in honor of that incredible feat, here's a couple wild statistics about how much scoring there is in the NBA this year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has scored 30 points in a loss 17 different times. Jason Tatum is now one of the only 3 Celtics ever to have 20 40 burgers in his career, along with Paul Pierce and Larry Bird. And he's still a very young man.
He's 24.
In fact, some people think he's only 19. By the way, these are from OptaStats and StatMuse. Klay Thompson scored 42 points the other night without making a single 2-point basket. Not one.
Attaboy.
Yesterday was the first time in NBA history that there were 2 non-overtime games in which one guy on each team scored at least 40 points in the same day. Donovan Mitchell had 44, and Tatum had 41. Damian Lillard had 41, and Brandon Ingram had 40. First time in history that's ever happened. Also, Damian Lillard now has more 60 burgers than Steph Curry, LeBron James, Shaquille O'Neal, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Tim Duncan, Bill Russell, and Kevin Durant combined.
60's hard to get. There haven't been, and that list you just gave had some zeros on it, did it not?
Also,
Yeah,
Bill Russell
right.
averaged like 15 points a game for his career. He shouldn't be on that
Yes,
list.
Bill
as he
Russell
scored.
is cheating, but still, good stats all. Before you get out of here, I did not know whether you saw the reporting, but I wanted to talk to Amin on the what appears to be the sports story of the day, which is Ja Morant, young superstar who is headed toward face of the league type status if he can do some winning, Stugotz, because LeBron's getting old and Steph Curry is older and we're numb to all the scoring, but we're not numb to the dunks, the giant dunks from the little guy.
But Jason Tatum's only 24, and Giannis, I think, is 25 or 26.
Ja Morant in Memphis, a team that promises to be interesting, but talks a lot and kind of wants to be hated. Kind of enjoys the villain role. Ja Morant is now getting some accusations in the Washington Post and beyond, that he beat up a teenager, a 17-year-old, and flashed a gun, and some other accusations that you've heard whispered around the league as Shannon Sharpe is trying to fight against all of the Memphis Grizzlies. So what is happening around Ja Morant and his family, and where does it conflict? Because Allen Iverson wanted and was this once for the league, and I don't think Ja Morant is that. I don't think he's Allen Iverson, but it sounds like he's running. He wants to give off that he's Allen Iverson.
Yeah, it's weird. I think Allen Iverson didn't court that stuff. It just happened. A lot of that stuff happened to him, and maybe you could point to who his friends were, his upbringing, but I don't think any of it was intentional for Iverson. I think with Ja Morant, it feels like there seems to be like an intention of wanting to be a badass away from the court, which is very conflicting because Ja grew up, as I said before, in a good, stable home and went to a good school and you know,
A private school. Went to a private school.
Yeah, I mean, people say private school. Private schools are not all created equally, right? Private schools in New York and L.A. are not the same as a private school in South Carolina or wherever he grew up.
My point being that he doesn't come from a lifestyle that would exude streets and gangster.
Yes. And
so he's going out of his way to present that, is what you're saying?
The
feels that way to you?
The hard thing, Stugotz, is what happens to unfortunately, a lot of guys who come into the league, particularly.
He doesn't exude streets and gangster.
Oh. Dash Dan Le Batard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You tell me what he's going for.
I'm going to checkmate Dan right now. Tell me who does.
Exude that.
What goes into exuding streets and
Zach
gangster?
Randolph in Memphis, if you want to be that. Zach Randolph.
The martial arts community.
Zebo.
Confirms that. The problem is for a lot of these guys, young guys that come in the league that have a certain amount of, particularly if they didn't come from an amazing kind of high-profile background, right? that fame happened upon them. You get, connected with people who are probably not of the most image conscious.
Just say it. Ne'er-do-wells.
Ne'er-do-wells. There you go.
Don't be afraid to say it. Ne'er-do-wells.
You run around with ne'er-do-wells, right?
Rabble-rousers.
And it can be fun and it can be exciting, and then until it gets you into a place with trouble. And at the time when we first talked about this, we had the incident with the Pacers saying that they had laser sights targeted on them or whatever.
The Pacers bus said that members of Ja Morant's crew, right? It wasn't Ja Morant, but members.
No, those came from Ja's eyes.
Where there was red dot after the Pacers had a brouhaha, a kerfuffle.
What is the question we're asking, Mike? Sure, I just want to be clear.
No idea.
I want to ask Mike Schur what he thinks of the reporting this morning on Ja Morant.
I haven't seen it, and I'm literally reading it as you guys are rambling and talking about nothing. So if you give me another 2 minutes, I'll catch up.
Let me filibuster a little bit more.
No, hold on. I have a question. 3-pointer for your life. Larry Bird or JJ Redick? Who you taking?
Oh, come on. That's an easy one for him.
Well, he might take Redick.
For your life.
He's a smart guy.
He's not.
Larry Bird didn't take that many 3-pointers.
He made them, though.
Answer
JJ
the
Redick
question.
probably
Take
took,
Redick.
JJ Redick took probably 10, in practice and in games probably took 10,000 more.
For your life.
For your life.
No, I'm taking Redick.
No way.
You're dead.
You're never going back to Boston.
See ya.
Yeah, just don't set foot out there ever again. Stay your ass
Larry
in LA.
Bird never hit 100 3-pointers in a season.
So what?
Not once.
For your life.
JJ Redick took thousands and thousands of more 3-pointers.
Did JJ Redick ever play a game shooting only left-handed because he was bored?
How many of those shots were 3-pointers? Were you not listening to the rules of the game?
Is it Larry Bird now?
No, it's Larry Bird back. Well,
85.
It could be Larry Bird now. I'd still take
Bird.
Larry Bird now over JJ Redick. Mike, there are threes.
JJ Redick career from
I don't care.
Shot 41.5% from three.
I
He
don't
shot
care.
47% from three.
Okay,
in 2015.
but when your life is on the line, Larry Bird shoots 100%. Okay, game over.
What do you have to say to that, Mike Schur? You don't have any answer for that. Game over. But when your life is on the line,
Larry
right.
Bird shoots
That's
100%.
Right. That is correct. You go ahead and accuse Stugotz of a made-up stat if you want, but you're the asshole. You're the one who doesn't know anything. Goodbye. Thank you for not
100%.
reading that story on Ja Morant. I only wanted to talk to Amin about it anyway. See you later.
He can never set foot back in Boston or Connecticut, where the hell he's from, right? It's done. It's a wrap.
That's shocking.
Right?
That's shocking.
No fly zone for old Mikey Schur. Oh, Mikey Schur, he thinks he's a big shot. He's going with JJ Redick over Bird. Give me a break.
Oh, it's great.
We still going?
I don't know.
Stugotz,
Yo,
Larry Bird, or Reggie Miller?
for my life?
Yes.
Now?
No. In
Prime?
Yeah.
Larry Bird.
Larry Bird or Steph Curry?
Larry Bird. For my life.
For your
Whoa,
life.
Steph. I was with you.
Yeah,
All up
see,
until Steph.
It's just for my life,
I
man.
want to see where the limits are, where the borders are.
No,
I
they
feel like
have
Larry
to.
would
they
care
have to
more
make
about my
it,
life.
or it's just I'm
I
not.
don't
Or they
know.
are each going and I have to pick a winner. I don't
No,
understand.
they
the
have
state.
to, like, hey, your life will end if the player of your choosing does not make this shot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a reality show.
It's a great show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the end is someone gets killed.
Just like,
Well, not the end. I mean, I would imagine a lot of people get killed on that show.
what would we have
the show
to
would
put?
be called The End.
What would the money prize have to be for if you survive? If you survive, we'll give you this amount. I mean, this is a ridiculous game.
You get to live. I mean,
$5 million if they make it,
Yeah.
but you die.
But you die if they miss that. I like
They
that,
miss.
Chris. Because you got to introduce
And you get to
stakes.
pick any shooter
Life is
in the
not enough?
history
No,
of NBA.
got to introduce stakes. Because if it's life or death, then it's like, why am I playing this game?
Right.
Why am I signing up for it? But if it's
fair.
like,
Totally fair.
I like
Yes.
that we set this up as a game and see which NBA players actually would participate in it. It's a psychological
No.
experiment. Who
It's-
would take a shot for someone else's
for someone's
a lot
life,
of pressure.
Dion Waiters.
You guys,
What type of shot?
But who would choose
Doesn't
him?
matter.
Stugotz, one of the worst things about this concoction of yours is that someone's last dying thought would be, "Oh shit! Not only do I die, but I thought Larry Bird would make this for my life."
Well, he would.
Like nobody would.
100%.
But if
it's 10 million, I'll let Steph shoot for my life.
No, man.
I won't do it for
You
5.
wouldn't. You wouldn't.
$10 million.
You wouldn't do $10
I
million.
will let Steph Curry
What?
shoot for my life.
are you kidding me?
10 mil?
It's actually not bad.
Oh, Mike.
You would do
He's
it.
gonna make it.
You would do it for so much less.
Everybody calm down. Exactly. Jess knows what the game is. The game is he said 10 million. So will you do it for 9 million? You wouldn't do it for $9 million. Would you do it for 10?
I don't. The whole death thing.
Your life?
Your life is
$9 million.
$9 million versus 10.
Tax free. Let's make it tax free.
Always tax
Well,
free.
why are you making it tax free?
It's always tax free.
We're making it tax free.
It's always
Tax-free.
tax free.
Does he warm up before?
Yes.
Or is he just
Sure,
strolling up cold?
No. He like this is a game show. So we got production, we got cameras, we got catering. He's in the back. He's doing stuff. Warming up whatever way he wants. 9 mil. 9 mil, Chris. You're not doing
9. All right, fine. If it's not taxed, 9 mil, but I'm not doing 8. The game stops at 9.
8.5.
9 million.
it.
8.8. All right, 8.8.
8.75. 8.75.
8.8.
You're saying
So 50 grand is the
Final
difference.
offer.
50 grand is the difference.
8.8.
50 grand.
8.8.
50 grand.
That's what your put it on the poll,
Good
please,
boy.
Juju. Is Chris Cody's life worth $8.8 million?
Well, he gets to determine that. I mean,
I feel like his
technically.
life insurance policy gets to
Right.
determine.
I mean,
Here's the worst part. I feel like
It was worth 50 mil a couple
Chris would
years ago.
blow through that money. That's the worst part. He'd blow through it. If he won, he got to 8.8 within 5 years. He'd be back here.
Responsible, fiscally responsible.
Let me play some sound for the audience because, Stugotz, you and I are now old enough, and I don't know where Amin is going to fall on this as a 40-year-old, and I can't imagine that Tony and Jessica care very much about what Michael Cooper is saying. But a long time ago,
40-year-old?
Boyish good looks.
Michael
Keep drinking
Cooper was an integral player on a dynastic Lakers team. And JJ Redick is basically saying now, he's going on to First Take all the time and just saying normal, human, reasonable things. And it's shocking when it's put next to Perk and Stephen A. Smith and Mad Dog that he is breaking down basketball just analytically with numbers that are irrefutable.
He's doing it in such a condescending way, though. It's annoying. It's such a Duke way. He no respect for Christopher Mad Dog Russo.
He thinks he's
Sorry.
smarter than you, and he's throwing around
Well, he
numbers
is.
that
I mean-
suggest that he is. And now this is pissing off the Michael Coopers of the world. Listen to what Coop is saying about JJ Redick, and there are old guys. Dominique Wilkins, I think, went after him the other day too. Listen to what Michael Cooper has to say. The human highlight reel.
JJ Redick, this kid here. This kid here who's a journeyman, played for 6 different teams. All his accolades came in college, played 15 years in the NBA, was being shifted around from team to team because all he could do was shoot. And he wasn't that great of a shooter. He was a poor man, Danny Ainge, because Steph is being played more physical. They got his hands on. In today's NBA, I don't know what game he's looking at. You can't touch the guy. Anytime you touch anybody, a three-point shooter, come close to them when they're landing, it's a foul. JJ Redick needs to be quiet and stop trying to compare. I think he's gotten out of this what he wants to, is that his name being thrown around and the attention and all that. But you know what? It's attention that he's not going to want because a lot of former players, myself just as one, along with Dominique, talk about this guy who's a poor man, Jeff Hornacek.
Horny.
I mean, where do you stand here? Whittingham, do you care about do you know who Michael Cooper is? I don't feel like the young people in this room have any appreciation for who that old person is yelling at the kids to get off his lawn.
Well, thank you for including me with the young people for once, because sometimes I feel left out. But I only know because of how much people bang on about the Showtime Lakers. I've never seen him play before. And I know, like, it was Magic Johnson and Kareem and Byron Scott and Michael Cooper. That's my only reference to Michael Cooper. It's the only way that I know who that is.
The Sox. I mean, you think Michael Cooper, you think Sox. That's what you think of,
Why
right?
didn't he compare him to Hershey Hawkins?
Ainge is a good comparison. I mean, Ainge was a great shooter.
Not a 47% shooter from 3.
What do you think JJ was for his career? You think he was 47%?
No, not for his career, but late in his career, JJ Redick became a specialized three-point shooter who was shooting 40% from 3.
You're just a
was he
poor
not?
man's Detlef Schrempf.
I mean, Ainge had many years where he shot, north of 40% from three-point. He did. He was 37% for his career. JJ Redick was 42.
Poor man's Brent Price.
Stu, you going Ainge or Redick?
For my
your
life?
Yeah.
Danny Ainge.
Well, if we're going to get nostalgic about this time, I wanted to talk about something here because Michael Jordan, mythical saint of all purity in sports, has been trying to sell his home for about 10 years in Highland Park, Chicago, Stugotz.
Mm-hmm.
And Jessica has some ideas.
Correction. Highland Park is a suburb very far north of Chicago. It's not a neighborhood in Chicago.
Well,
Chicagoland? Can we
it's
say
in
that?
Chicagoland.
Give us the details. As someone who's totally obsessed with Zillow.
Oh, that was
Zilla's
close.
different. It's a totally different thing. But as someone who is obsessed with real estate prices, Stugotz, I got to be quick around you, man. You were getting ready
want
to
someone's money.
find me quickly. You were getting ready there. What are the fluctuations on Michael Jordan's house? How long has he been trying to sell it?
It's fascinating. He's been trying to sell this house for over a decade, and the price has gone down 50%. They listed it at $30 million. Now it's on sale for a measly $15 million. But no one wants this house because it's all, I assume because A, it's humongous and the property taxes are probably insane, but also it's like completely customized to Michael Jordan. Like there's a Air Jordan logo in the theater room. There's a 23 on the front gate.
That's cool too.
And it's
Amazing.
massive. And I'm fascinated with these massive houses that end up on Zillow that just sit there for years because, like, reasonably, no one really can afford it or move into it. And they're completely customized. Like, he's got a customized Air Jordan indoor basketball court, like full basketball court.
Who would want that?
These sounds like selling points to
These
me.
are reasons to buy the house. In
Yeah.
fact, Dan, I think we at Meadowlark should buy the house. Make him a low ball offer. He keeps cutting the price. It's a good real estate market for the buyer, not the seller. And I think we should probably, now mortgage rates are a bit high, but we'll worry about that after the fact.
Say we come in at like 10.
Yeah, we could always refi.
We go cash.
I think we should buy it. Listen, I almost purchased Joe Girardi's house. Okay?
Why? Why?
Just
'cause
for
he
the
played in
story?
the majors, yeah. He had these perfect game balls right up front. I went to visit the house. I took a tour. He had these perfect game. I think he's caught 3 perfect games.
He'd probably take those with him.
One from no, they came with the
come with the
house. I told them those were my demands. And there was a picture of him and I think Tino Martinez autographed
Oh, Timo.
right in the dining room. I mean, that is a reason to buy a house. I would buy Jordan's house. Dan, let's do it.
Forgive me. I don't think Joe Girardi. There's only been like 15 perfect games ever. I don't think Joe Girardi has.
It may have been a
3 of
perfect game
them.
and a couple of no-nos. It was something.
Okay.
He's catching them though.
Yeah.
The
And he's
thing
fine.
about-
And he's fine leaving them at the house.
The
Yeah.
thing about Michael Jordan's house is if we bought it, there's only 9 bedrooms, so we'd have to share bedrooms, but there's 19 bathrooms, so we each get our own bathroom.
Tell me that's not the perfect situation for this show. The amount of poop we do, everyone getting their own bathroom would be perfect. When do we?
You can have 3, Amin.
Thank you.
One of my least favorite things about the Airbnb experience is the stress of room selection when you're with a group.
Oh, it's the worst.
It's just
What?
it's so passive
It's a
aggressive.
free-for-all.
It's all like I don't care what room I end up
No.
in, and then it's like I'm gonna go end up in that room.
Chris?
It's all I don't like it. It's stressful.
What are you
I
doing?
stay outside and I'm just like I'll sleep on the couch. I don't want this stress.
Hold
Oh
on.
no, I get in there early and I
Yeah.
stake my claim.
Have you never watched like Jersey Shore
I
or the
lift
Real
my
World
leg
or
and I
whatever?
piss all over that bed. That was fine.
They open that door, everyone rushes in like,
gotta mark your territory.
But
Immediately.
the part is that everybody beforehand will be like, "Oh, I don't care what room I." It's like it's so different before, and then when you get there, it's just I don't like it. It stresses. I'm sweating right now just thinking about it.
You know what it's like, Chris? Whenever they have like food catering, and it comes out, and everyone's like, "Who's gonna be the first one?" I
You.
don't want to be. I'm like, to hell with that. I'm hungry. I go in there, I start shoveling, and I shovel like no one else is
So
eating.
you're the guy
after.
that always gets the master bedroom in the Airbnb. Shouldn't it be the person that booked it? Doesn't that person get dibs on the
Yes,
on the
that
master?
person, and if it's bachelor or bachelorette party, the bride or groom gets to pick.
Never been to one.
But really interesting.
Never been to one.
When you're on one of those parties, there's always a thing where it's like, oh, who's gonna sleep in the same room as
Yeah.
the bride or the groom?
I
Like,
will. I'm
who's the
willing.
best
It's like no, you're
friend?
not.
It's like,
You're not really willing.
Everyone wants to sleep in that room because they feel special, right?
I hate to be a stickler about this, but you guys are off point here. Are we buying Michael Jordan's house or not?
Low
I think
ball
we're
offer.
Before
all
we're
in.
fight- before
I don't
we're
want to
fighting-
split the rooms.
Before we're fighting over the individual 9 rooms, I think of it more as something you buy to make a museum. I think these are selling points that you have a gym that is Michael Jordan's personal gym. If we're infatuated with this person,
It's got to be zoned for that. What you do is you throw a mosque there.
rent the house, rent Michael Jordan's
Yeah,
house
yeah.
for a party.
It's not going to be zoned for a museum, so we just have a one-night rager, boom, in, out.
Air Moss.
Why?
I
why
like
has
it.
it gone down by that in the real estate market as everything goes up? If I told you 10 years ago, hey, do you think somebody's going to want to buy Michael Jordan's house because it's Michael Jordan's? Just because it's Michael
That
Jordan's.
is a little surprising to me, but then you have to think about the fact that it costs a fortune to live in this house.
Not even that. This is
Okay,
this
go-
is really
go
easy.
on.
You know what it is?
Yeah.
Well,
You have $15 million to spend on a residence.
Well,
right?
until recently 30.
Okay, but let's just
Big price cut.
The current price is 15, right? You have $15 million to spend on a residence. And you're telling me you're gonna buy a house north of Chicago?
Far north.
yeah, but it's MJ's.
Ew. Why can't I buy MJ's house down here?
It's not for sale.
Or Hilton Head or
Right.
wherever.
Well, no, but this is the house he lived in while he was Michael Jordan
Yeah.
in his prime.
While
And
he
he's
was
selling it now.
Well,
Notice.
yes.
Right.
Well, he's been selling it for 10 years.
It's freezing.
And it is very cold there. But again, you got to imagine Stugotz living there.
Yeah.
Imagine Stugotz being able to show his friends, hey, this was Michael Jordan's.
Show my friends. You have me inviting anyone over? I'm just telling them I live at MJ's house.
You have to because it's so big. It would feel so empty. It
we'll
would be
see.
like living with ghosts.
I got Stugotz wearing Michael Jordan's bathrobe. It's dragging behind him like Princess Di's wedding dress, right? He's got a cigar. He's walking. He's sliding from room to room like Tom Cruise
He's like,
in Risky
it was
Business.
worth it. He's looking around. He's just like, it was worth it.
Here's a line from Business Insider. The listing is 30 times the price of the other homes in the upscale
Yeah, how are the
Chicago
comps?
neighborhood.
See what I'm
like
saying?
it is 30 times the price of all the other rich people houses in Highland Park.
I'm going to spend that money to live amongst people who are way poorer than me? Hell no. Right? Like anyone who can afford that house can afford to buy a better house.
Here-
But there isn't one dork Michael Jordan fan
That's-
that just like
that's
wants to
surprising
spend
to
the
me.
15 million. Like
You can get on like Fort Lauderdale on the Intercoastal. You can get for like $6 million, like a gigantic
No, you're
mansion.
Right. You're
Michael
right,
Jordan
but
didn't live
what
there.
Woody is saying is shocking. There's not a dork Michael Jordan fan out there who's super wealthy who could just spring $15 million just to have his house.
According to industry insiders, most people in Chicago who can financially maintain an estate this size would have built it on the lake. But he was like, I don't want to live by the lake. I want privacy.
I saw that. I actually saw an Antonio Brown Cribs the other day where
Cold on the lake, man.
Put that shit on.
He built I think in Davie or somewhere else a mansion that is as big as a block. It
That
takes
was his house in Hollywood, I think. It was humongous.
it just ridiculous sized house. I want you to imagine Stugotz finding a Michael Jordan bathrobe in one of the storage rooms.
Oh.
Putting it on, having it flow behind him. I know it sounds a bit sad and haunted, but making his way through the house as he walks over to the gym where Michael Jordan played the private games. He experiences it for the first time, and then he never goes in it again. And he is sad that he has made a terrible purchase.
Sad. You're right. I never visit the basketball court again. I never play on it. In fact, I spend maybe a weekend in the house, and you're right. I probably never come back, but I own it.
It's $15 million to
Yes.
say you own Michael Jordan's
I'm good
house.
with that. If I had $15 million, I mean,
He's got a putting green, but at this expense, couldn't you just buy a small golf course somewhere?
I believe Mark Wahlberg has, he's selling like $100 million home that has like a 5-hole golf course in the back in Hollywood. I believe that's what Mark Wahlberg's 45 rated on Rotten Tomatoes movies will get you. in
Spencer
Los
Confidential.
Angeles.
Cinephobe episode. I don't know. We've done it though.
By the way, I have a Girardi update on behalf of Stugotz.
Yeah.
He would have 3 baseballs of significance from pitching occasions.
Thank
Number
you.
1, he caught David Cohn's perfect game.
Coney.
Number 2, he caught Doc Gooden's no-hitter for the Yankees.
Dr.
And number
K.
3, he managed the no-hitter of Anibal Sanchez while he was with the Marlins.
Whoa!
What?
I was at that.
Anibal Sanchez threw a no-hitter?
But why does he get the ball?
Look at me,
I know many people around here are tired of hearing me lamenting things that we cannot do anything about helplessly or hopelessly. But this man, author of a #1 New York Times bestseller, The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming. He's a columnist for the New York Times, and he also... He has been at the forefront of writing about the environmental crises all over the globe. David Wallace Wells is with us. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, especially while Amin is here, Amin, who lives in Arizona out west, I was struck when I was reading the Washington Post, David. It was confusing to me because a story in the middle of the paper, in the 5th paragraph, there was this quote from somebody who would know about such things, a climate scientist. We're 32 feet above where problems occur, and we've had years recently where we've lost 50 feet or more of reservoir volume. We're one bad year away from reaching the point where we can't generate hydropower. That's the first worry here. It's about what's happened with the Colorado River and how many people depend on this water. Amin lives in Arizona. This sounded to me buried in the newspaper, like we're a year from the West not having water that they need in a meaningful way. So I wanted to understand it better with an expert. Thank you for joining us, David. How am I reading this quote in the middle of a throwaway story when it's got to be the story of our lifetime that the West is going to run out of water?
I mean, the crazy thing is when it comes to climate, you could sort of ask the same thing about 100 other impacts that we're barely talking about: the impacts on food production, the effect on migration, the effect on conflict. Air pollution is estimated from the burning of fossil fuels now to kill at least 8 million people a year. Water is the most present threat in the desert Southwest, but it's not even the most present threat in California, where people are worried about wildfire and wildfire smoke. And we're now talking about these extreme weather whiplashes that take people from one extreme to another, mudslides, all the rest of it. But yeah, it's a really quite big deal. We're not paying nearly enough attention to it. I think one reason why it's a little bit buried, and one reason to caution a little sort of moderation in whatever level of panic you're having, is that water in general is primarily a political problem, not a climate problem. We have enough fresh water in the world to serve the needs of many more people that are living on it today. The problem is, in the developing world, it gets really dirty. We don't have sanitation. People aren't investing in water resources enough. And in the developed world, in places like the American West, we're using the water we have in probably not productive ways. So you probably can think of like people with their green lawns in the middle of the desert. That's part of it. But much more striking is the fact that the American West is a huge agricultural center, even though it is also a desert. So we basically, over the course of a few generations, when we were blessed with a lot of water, we decided to turn natural desert into farmland. And the amount of water that uses is enormous. I think 90% of the water that's used in the American West goes to agriculture. And as a result, all of our other needs are really pinched. Now, when you throw climate on top of that, and you start having these droughts, like the drought that we have in the American West now is longer than the drought that killed off a lot of the Indian civilizations that lived in that region in the Middle Ages, what we think of as the Middle Ages. So it's a major drought. It's been going on for a couple of decades. When you throw that on top of this problem of water management, you get a real crisis. And that's where we are right now with the Colorado River, with Lake Powell, actually also the Great Salt Lake, which is drying up. All through the West, we're having these shortages. I think what's going to happen is that these states are going to get together and negotiate a new set of agreements and arrangements so that the water isn't drawn down in the same way that it has been in the past, and will sort of avert the near-term crisis. But in the long term, we got to rethink how much of the water that we have in this natural desert we're devoting to agriculture, how much we're giving to people to use in their homes, how much we're using to run hydropower and all the rest of it. Because as you say, like the power plants are at risk of not running. The risk of water shortages in major cities, even like at the tap. And farmers are going to suffer dramatically, even without new apportionment. So it's a crisis, but it's a political crisis rather than narrowly a climate crisis. But that may sound reassuring, but the truth is, it's probably scarier because, like, if there's one thing that the recent history of climate impacts has taught us, it's that we are not politically prepared to actually solve even the problems that we have the tools to solve. We choose instead to normalize disaster, to back away, and to underinvest in those places that are hit hardest. So it's going to be a tricky few years for the American West, and maybe even a tricky century, depending on how things go.
Explain to me the practical worst case scenario damages if that reservoir, the Lake Powell Reservoir, and its Glen Canyon Dam drops 3,500 feet, and the dam is unable to generate hydropower.
Well, I think there would be at least a period of time where many millions of people who live in, the richest country the world has ever known, in an area of development that has been celebrated as like the future of America for a century, would go without power, and not just for a period of a day or a few days, but potentially longer than that. The power generated by these dams in the American West is really, really significant. You're talking about Phoenix, you're talking about Las Vegas, you're talking about major metropolitan centers, again, that were basically built on the American expectation that like we lived outside of nature, we could do whatever we wanted in the natural world, didn't have to worry about natural limits that other civilizations, even contemporary civilizations around the world, took really seriously. And just that like our wealth and our engineering power would allow us to navigate that future. We're coming up against some much harder limits that are going to make force some much harder choices on us. I don't think we're going to get to that point. I think if we're actually close to like not generating power for many millions of people, we will make changes, but those changes will be consequential too. If we reduce the amount of water that's supplied to farmers in the American West by 10 or 20%, that has a really dramatic effect on the American agricultural yields. It has a dramatic effect on all of the people who are working farms, particularly in the California Central Valley, but all across the West. So it's not like we're in a situation where we can just take an easy path out of the crisis. I think we're not going to get to a point where we hit dead pool, which is the term that people use for when those hydropower power stations can't operate anymore. But in order to avoid that, we're going to have to we're going to have to pass through some pinch points in some other parts of our society. And, there's probably going to be there's going to be some water rationing at the consumer level, certainly at the farm level, at the agricultural level. And we're just, we have all of us, like we were given by birthright as Americans, especially as like relatively well-off white Americans, we were given this expectation that like, we just didn't have to worry about this stuff. And because of climate change, we're now entering a century in which it is going to be part of how we think about everything we do and make almost everything we do that much harder. I mean, I mentioned a few minutes ago, like the drought that the American West is going through now is worse than the droughts that killed off whole Native American civilization centuries ago. In the really big picture, the planet's already warmer than it's ever been in the entire history of human civilization. So we've already left behind the climate conditions that allowed us to develop agriculture anywhere in the world, to develop civilization, industrial civilization, all of the expectations that we have about the way we live on this world and what the future holds, we've already left behind. It's like we've landed on a totally different planet, and we now have to figure out what of the culture, civilization, economy, engineering practices that we brought with us can work on this new planet, and what we're going to have to discard and replace. And I think that's in the abstract, you can say, okay, we can engineer our way out of it. I think we can. But when it comes down to like concrete details, you're talking about millions of people living in the American West in particular, but we could talk about everywhere around the world, whose basic presumptions about the way that their lives are going to go and the future is going to be upended by these forces. And I think we're really, really not prepared to do that or to make many of the hard choices that would allow us to get on the other side of it, starting with decarbonization, but well beyond that to all the things that we have to do to adapt to the future that we already know is coming.
I imagine, given that the bestseller, the name of it is The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming, I imagine that when you go to sleep at night, the way that you sleep is simply for 8 hours screaming at your ceiling, just screaming, and that's how you sleep. It's not actually REM sleep. It's just, oh my God, the horrors that we are doing to this planet. When you think about the individual appalling things, where does the water crisis rank on your list of fears? How many of them are ahead of the water crisis that's coming, given that the top story on this, which I also expect to read in the Washington Post 6 months from now in the 5th paragraph of an article on page 5, is the world is ending. All of the world is ending, and we're burying the news story.
I mean, to be totally honest, I think that the water crisis is not a top shelf climate concern. I think that especially when we talk about it in a place like the US, we have the resources and the engineering capacity to continue to live in some way that resembles the way that we've lived in the past. It's going to be difficult to get over those obstacles and to make those choices, but we have the resources to do it. Some of the other challenges I think are a lot trickier, a lot harder. I mentioned air pollution. Air pollution from the burning of fossil fuels is right now today cutting 2.5 years off of life expectancy of every person on the planet on average. In parts of India, you're talking about 10 years of life expectancy lost on average. So hundreds of millions of people whose lives are going to be 10 years shorter than they would be without air pollution from the burning of fossil fuels. That is an unbelievably large impact. And we're suffering even in places like the US where we have relatively clean air. I'm worried about, impacts on conflict, on migration, estimates that we're going to see hundreds of millions of climate migrants over the next couple of decades. We don't have a political system globally that's really prepared to deal with those things. Food crises, we're already seeing, the impact of the war on Ukraine on hunger in the Horn of Africa has been really dramatic. We've seen the numbers of people going hungry or starving grow by tens or even hundreds of millions of people because of that war. And the climate change, well, it's not going to mean that none of us can grow food anywhere on the planet. It's going to disrupt the system enough so that we see episodes like that much, much more frequently than we have in the past. And even more than any one of these individual impacts, I think that, altogether, it's going to be really hard to be living in a future where we're assaulted almost every day by a new challenge. And I mentioned the whiplash weather in California. That's really illuminating, I think. In places you have wildfires, which people are terrified of, but it's also the case that the smoke from those fires are poisonous and toxic. Then once the trees burn down, it means that the hills are not protected against mudslides. So you have mudslides when the rains come, and the rains are heavier and more intense than they've ever been before. Then you have these, in other parts of the state, dramatic drought that makes it really hard to produce agriculture. At other times, like we've just seen over the last few days, you have these crazy intense snowstorms with several feet falling at once in places that haven't seen snow in decades. And you're just seeing a discombobulation of the whole basis of human life as we know it. And I think humans are adaptable and resilient. And actually, to your point, I'm really worried about the future, but I also think that we can navigate it. I'm not too much of a doomsayer in that sense. I don't think that the world is going to end. It's just going to be a really different world, one that's much more defined by climate impacts and climate suffering than I think any of us who were raised in the 1980s, the 1990s really have, the brain space to contemplate.
Yeah, Dave, that's the thing that really trips me out is that I remember being a kid and learning about climate change in school, and it was always stuff like by the year 2075 we'll have run out of whatever, and it just felt like just something that's a million years away in the future. And now we're at a place where we're, maybe a year out from not being able to generate hydropower to the American Southwest. I guess my question is, given that I don't think the changing in behavior is happening at a pace to keep up with the changing in climate, how long are we from what you just talked about, from being in a place where our way of life is irrevocably changed as a result of climate change?
It feels like we're there already in some ways.
No, we're not. I mean, he said it. We're all living like...
No, but in some parts of the world where the mudslides are hitting, where you've got people dying and drowning, where there's flooding in Las Vegas, there's no water in Las Vegas, or there's a drought in Las Vegas, but weirdly, all of a sudden, the casinos are filling with water.
I mean, there are a lot of ways to answer the question, and Dan, I think you hit the nail on the head that this is not just a global problem. It has really particular local impacts. I mean, if you think about the flooding that hit Pakistan last year, by some estimates, a quarter of the country was underwater for a period of several months. And this is a country, by the way, that in its entire industrial history has produced less carbon emissions than the US produces every single year. And we've seen, it's not just the flooding that they saw there, it's also the fact that because of the flooding, they're going to have huge outbreaks of mosquito-borne diseases, cholera and dengue. which we basically don't think of as being features of the modern world, those of us living in the US. Although the truth is that climate change is expanding the footprint of mosquitoes so that we are going to be dealing with tropical diseases as far north as the Arctic Circle, probably later this century. And those changes are happening really, really fast. I mean, just to pause on that for a second, I also was raised to learn to think about climate change as a really distant thing in the future. The sort of one of the most prominent climate change scientists who really raised the alarm on this, and starting in the 1980s, James Hansen, his big book about it is called Storms of My Grandchildren. And I think we also think about it as something that we did way in the past that started hundreds of years ago. So it's like a slow process. It starts when we start burning coal in England in the 18th century, and it's really going to only start impacting us at the end of the 21st century. But half of all of the damage that we have done in the entire history of humanity through the burning of fossil fuels and the production of carbon emissions has come in the last 25 years. And that's since Al Gore published his first book on warming. It's since the UN established its IPCC climate change body, so everybody agreed that it was a problem. It's since the premiere of Friends. We've done more damage to the planet since the premiere of Friends than we did in the entire history of humanity leading up to that point. We've done a quarter of that damage since Joe Biden was elected vice president, on a ticket with President Barack Obama, who in accepting the nomination said, this is the moment we're going to look back on as the moment the planet began to heal and the rising of the seas began to slow. Since that time, we've done 1/4 of all the damage that we've ever done in the history of humanity. And right now, there's a lot of enthusiasm in the climate world that we may be peaking emissions. We may have reached a peak and are about to start to decline or at least plateau. But all that means is that we've achieved this breakthrough. We may, this year, no longer be doing more damage than we have done in every single year in the entire history of humanity to come before. That's all that it means to have peaked. And that's like a great breakthrough. We got to get all the way from that, which is last year we did more damage than in any other year in the history of humanity. We have to go down from that all the way down to zero in order to stop warming. Now, I think there are some really encouraging signs there, actually. We may not feel it. It may not feel like we're moving fast enough. But in fact, there have been revisions to our expectations for the climate future in the last couple of years that are really dramatic, because countries really are starting to invest in green energy, solar power, wind power. The electric vehicle revolution is unfolding at an unbelievably rapid pace. So it's no longer the case that we're expecting something like 3 or 4 times as much warming as we've seen to this point. We're probably only expecting about twice as much warming as we've seen to this point. That will be catastrophic. It will be hugely disruptive, but it's going to be much better than where we thought we were a few years ago, because finally, belatedly, too slow, yes, but finally we are moving in the right direction. The problem is, moving in the right direction is not the same thing as winning the race. It just means that we just started running, and we got to run a lot faster.
David, thank you for the insight. Appreciate your work at the New York Times Magazine, and also the bestseller, as I mentioned, The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me. Great to talk.
Not so great to talk. Deeply depressing.
Yeah.